Hakeem Jeffries just declared victory in a showdown that should alarm anyone who believes in executive power limits. ICE Director Christy Noem is out, not because the president wanted it, but because House Democrats threatened impeachment and forced his hand. She's fired or we impeach her, Jeffries said, and it worked. But here's what should terrify you. Jeffries isn't celebrating, he's escalating. A change in personnel is not sufficient, he declared, then laid out 10 demands that would fundamentally restructure how immigration enforcement works in America. This isn't oversight, it's a constitutional stress test, and the implications go far beyond ICE.
Questions?
Mr. Leader.
Hi, Christy Noem.
Thank you. You served with Mark Wayne Mullen in the House of Representatives. He's been in the Senate for a couple of years now. Somebody who's tight with the president. Is this an upgrade, in your opinion?
Well, let's cross that bridge when we get to it, and we'll see what he has to say when and if there.
What was your impression of serving with him in the House? Did you
I don't
ever
have any. I don't have any comment right now on what's to come. Let's focus on what's taking place right now. Christy Noem is gone. Good riddance. She was a disaster, and House Democrats made something very clear. Several weeks ago, we said either Christy Noem is fired or she's going to be impeached.
Does that change the ICE conversation?
And
Does
Christy
that open the door to DHS now?
Christy Noem has been fired, consistent with what we have demanded on behalf of the American people. But let me also make clear, a change in personnel is not sufficient. We need a change in policy. And that has to be bold, dramatic, transformational, and meaningful. And we've laid out 10 different demands standing on the side of the American people, including but not limited to judicial warrants, a ban on racial profiling, a prohibition on ICE targeting sensitive locations like schools, hospitals, polling sites, and houses of worship, a requirement that ICE agents are actually vetted through criminal background checks and actually trained, the implementation of a prohibition on the excessive use of force, which we've seen horrifically been unleashed on the American people, and of course, a requirement that ICE agents who break the law can be criminally investigated by state and local authorities. These are the type of policy changes that are going to be necessary to move us forward to ensure that ICE actually conducts itself like every other law enforcement agency in the country. That's our fundamental demand. Every other law enforcement agency in the country. So, of course, this change in personnel is welcome. Christy Noem is a disgrace. And we made clear what was going to happen. One way or the other. Could it happen the easy way or the hard way? He's chosen the easy way. But now we still have work that needs to be done in terms of the policy changes.
What Hakeem Jeffries just did wasn't standard political theater. It was a masterclass in leveraging congressional power to force executive compliance, and the implications should worry anyone who cares how institutions function, regardless of where you stand on immigration. Let me start with what actually happened. House Democrats threatened impeachment against ICE Director Christy Noem, and the administration blinked. She's gone. That's not how impeachment is supposed to work. It's designed to remove officials for high crimes and misdemeanors, not as a policy enforcement tool. But Jeffries proved something crucial. Formal authority only matters if you're willing to use it. Congress just forced a personnel change through raw political pressure, and that precedent won't stay confined to immigration. But here's where it gets dangerous. Jeffries made clear that firing Noem isn't enough. A change in personnel is not sufficient, he said. Then he laid out 10 demands that would fundamentally restructure how immigration enforcement operates in America. I need you to understand what he's actually asking for, because this goes way beyond accountability. First, he wants judicial warrants for every ICE arrest. Right now, ICE uses administrative warrants signed by supervisors, not judges. Requiring judicial review sounds like due process, but here's the operational reality. It would slow enforcement to a crawl. Every arrest would need a judge to review probable cause. Cases become reviewable in court. The agency loses the speed that makes large-scale operations possible. Immigration enforcement is civil law, not criminal. Jeffries wants to impose criminal law standards, which would operationally paralyze the system. Second, He wants a ban on racial profiling with enforcement mechanisms. Immigration agents make judgments during workplace raids and traffic stops based on appearance, language, and behavior. A formal ban with penalties would open ICE to constant civil rights litigation. Agents would need to articulate individualized suspicion for every single interaction. I'm not defending profiling. I'm explaining that this demand is designed to make field enforcement legally treacherous. Third, no enforcement at schools, hospitals, polling places, or houses of worship. This creates geographic sanctuary zones where immigration status becomes irrelevant. It means undocumented individuals can access services and participate in civic life without fear. It transforms ICE from omnipresent to geographically constrained. That's a policy choice with real consequences for how enforcement functions. Fourth, criminal background checks and extensive training for all agents. You'd think that already exists, right? It doesn't. ICE hired rapidly, and vetting has been inconsistent. Jeffries wants FBI-level screening, disqualifying people with criminal records, psychological issues, or extremist ties. That would slow hiring, increase costs, and potentially disqualify current personnel. It's accountability, but it's also friction. Fifth, restrictions on excessive force with mandatory reporting and independent review. ICE has used tactics, aggressive raids, restraints, family separations that would trigger investigations if local police did them. Jeffries wants every physical encounter scrutinized and documented. That makes enforcement slower and more cautious. Sixth, and this is constitutionally explosive, he wants states to have authority to criminally investigate ICE agents. Right now, federal supremacy shields federal officers from state prosecution for official actions. Jeffries wants to strip that immunity. An agent following federal orders in Texas could face criminal charges in California. You'd have 50 different legal regimes. Officers would face impossible choices between following orders and avoiding state prosecution. That doesn't create accountability, it creates chaos. Now I want you to zoom out with me. Jeffries says he wants ICE to operate like every other law enforcement agency, with warrants, oversight, and accountability. That sounds reasonable until you understand why immigration enforcement never operated that way. It's administrative enforcement of civil law, not criminal prosecution. The speed, the lack of judicial warrants, the federal supremacy, those aren't accidents. They're features designed to make enforcement operationally feasible. When Jeffries demands ICE operate like local police, he's really saying, I want to make this administration's enforcement priorities operationally impossible. That's legitimate politics, but call it what it is. Policy transformation disguised as accountability reform. Here's my concern about institutional precedent. When Congress threatens impeachment to force policy changes rather than address actual misconduct, it normalizes a weapon both parties will use. Today it's ICE. Tomorrow it could be the EPA, FBI, or SEC. Any agency whose policies Congress dislikes becomes vulnerable to personnel purges driven by political pressure. That corrodes the executive branch's ability to function. The state-federal conflict Jeffries is creating is equally dangerous. If states can prosecute federal agents for following federal law, you don't get accountability, you get paralysis. Federal officers can't operate when they face criminal liability in hostile jurisdictions. That fragments the country into enforcement zones and sanctuary zones, turning federalism into a weapon. But I also see the Democratic argument. ICE expanded for 2 decades with minimal congressional authorization for specific tactics. If Congress wants to reclaim authority and impose constraints, that's constitutionally legitimate. The question is whether threatening impeachment and issuing ultimatums destroys the separation of powers it's meant to protect. What happens next matters enormously. If this administration implements all 10 demands, immigration enforcement fundamentally changes. If they resist, we're headed for constitutional crisis. And if this becomes the template, threaten impeachment, force personnel changes, demand reforms, we've entered an era where institutions fight rather than deliberate. This isn't just about immigration. It's about whether Congress can weaponize impeachment for policy leverage, whether federal agencies can survive conflicting state laws, and whether our institutions can handle conflict without collapsing. Those questions affect everything from environmental regulation to national security. The answers we accept now will define American governance for decades.